The room was windowless, with matte grey walls and a floor coated in black polymer. The ceiling panels were recessed, lit evenly by strips of low-glare LEDs. No corners gathered dust, no scuff marks blemished the surfaces. It had the look of something installed recently, but cheaply, prefabricated, bolted into the side of an older wing. A retrofit. At the center of the room was a composite table mounted directly into the floor. No sharp edges, no detachable parts. 6 fixed chairs surrounded it, the color and texture of orange peel. A slim monitor was mounted on the wall, displaying a Jaunt Solutions holding screen, a gentle gradient, and the company's heavily stylized chrysalis logo. A pane of reinforced glass on the far wall looked down into another chamber. White, brightly lit and almost empty. Only the device stood there, stark and upright like an artillery shell waiting quietly in a launch tube. Its casing was rugged, precisely machined, suggesting advanced technology without ornament. A piece of equipment built solely to perform. A dense coil of cables connected it firmly to the wall, feeding it power and data in a constant low hum. Inside the antechamber, 5 people were seated. One of them was shackled, ankles to the chair frame, wrists loosely bound in front. He wore a clean, grey, institution-issued uniform with neon orange markings. His posture was closed, his hands folded tightly. He looked around the room every few seconds, not anxious exactly, but out of place, like someone who'd spent too much of his life being told when and where to sit. Opposite him sat a man in a trim suit, mid-40s, clean-shaven, sharp features. His name badge identified him as a liaison for Jaunt Solutions, but he carried himself like a salesman, not a scientist or civil servant. There was no pen in his hand, no briefcase, just a digital tablet he hadn't needed to check since the meeting began. To clarify once more, the liaison said, voice calm, "You are being offered early completion of sentence under Provision 38, Subsection 3, Accelerated Custodial Resolution. The legal sentence remains unchanged. The manner of fulfillment, however, is modified. The state recognizes this as equivalent to time served." He glanced to the prisoner. "Do you understand so far?" The man nodded slowly. "That's fine, I'll explain. It's called the hole because the system relies on gravitational manipulation, curving local space-time in a way that creates a steep temporal differential between the interior and the external world. The name isn't a reference to solitary confinement, though the result is not dissimilar. The body itself is suspended in what we call a localized entropic field. On a molecular level, entropy is halted, metabolic function, cell turnover, aging, all reduced to zero. It's as if the body has been removed from time altogether, but the brain, or more specifically, the brain's electrical signaling, is exempt. We use a form of quantum induction to maintain the synaptic charge differentials, effectively allowing the brain to continue firing in isolation. No oxygen, no glucose, no protein synthesis. Just sustained electrical activity, carefully balanced and externally powered. From the outside, the entire procedure takes about 3 to 5 seconds. From the subject's perspective, the experience is somewhat longer. Consciousness remains active, fully aware, within a tightly compressed temporal frame. The mind continues to run in real time, not virtual time, not simulated thought, actual, experiential time. Next to the liaison sat a senior corrections officer, and next to her sat Grant Freeman, a technician contracted through Jaunt. He wore a black ID band and the standard company red maintenance coverall. He was here as a systems monitor, required by policy, but not required to speak. His tablet screen glowed faintly, showing live diagnostics from the chamber next door, pressure equalization, shielding thresholds, cortical envelope readiness. The prisoner looked across at him. You're the one that runs it. I operate the system, Freeman replied. Yes. And it's over fast? 3 seconds from our side. And for me? There was a pause. The liaison smiled, stepping in before Freeman could answer. From your perspective, the full sentence is experienced, but you exit the process physically unchanged, like a bad dream. That's the benefit. The man in the chair shifted his weight, the sound of the restraints soft but definite. You'll walk in, you'll walk out, the liaison said. We handle the rest. He slid a consent tablet across the table. The interface displayed the prisoner's name, a digital signature line, and a set of checkboxes already filled in: risk acknowledgement, cognitive capacity waiver, and final sentencing declaration. Freeman watched the man pick up the stylus. He held it like he wasn't used to one, uncertain, careful. The signature came out crooked, the letters too large at first, then squeezed in at the end. He looked up once, mid-signature, and met Freeman's eyes. You're sure it's safe? Freeman hesitated, then sat forward slightly. The others fell quiet. There are 3 main systems, he said, voice even. The first is the entropic field. It surrounds the body and arrests biological entropy completely. No metabolism, no cellular decay, no oxygen demand. You won't age a second. The prisoner listened, still holding the stylus in his hand. The second system is a quantum induction array. It provides a controlled stream of low-level energy to the brain, just enough to maintain consciousness. It bypasses the usual metabolic pathways entirely. That energy comes from vacuum fluctuation fields. There's no need for food, water, or breathing. Your mind stays active, even though your body's effectively paused. The liaison shifted in his seat, but didn't interrupt. The third layer, Freeman said, is the temporal compression field. This creates a localized space-time bubble around you. Within it, time flows differently, faster. You'll experience each moment fully, but the outside world will see only a few seconds pass. You'll live the sentence in real time, from your point of view, and then walk out exactly as you were. Same age? The prisoner asked. Exactly the same. But it'll feel like years. Yes, that's correct. The prisoner looked back at the consent screen. Better than 30 years, he muttered, then tapped confirm. Thank you, the liaison said. You've made a responsible choice. The senior officer marked something on her clipboard as a warden stepped in from the side room. He checked the prisoner's restraints, gave a brief nod, and said, We'll process him first thing tomorrow. The prisoner was led out without protest. He didn't ask where they were taking him. He simply gave one last glance at the viewing glass and the device waiting in the chamber beyond. When the door sealed behind him, Freeman remained in his seat. The others gathered their things. The contractor gave him a curt nod as he passed. No noise, no drama, he said, pleased. Exactly how it should be. Freeman didn't speak. He watched the light in the next room cycle once, reflected faintly in the observation glass. Rhythmic, sterile, indifferent. The cell he was brought to felt like a waiting room more than a place of proper confinement. It was small and rectangular, with walls painted a uniform off-white. A recessed overhead light hummed faintly, illuminating the single bunk fixed against the far wall. Compared to the rest of the prison, this space seemed almost too clean, like it hadn't been used for more than a handful of nights. He settled onto the bunk, elbows on his knees, and tried to calm his restless breathing. Technically, he was still a prisoner. Shackles off for the moment, but the door behind him was secured by a locking mechanism that hissed whenever it engaged. Tomorrow he would be processed, and his sentence would end. That had been the promise. He would walk into the hole, wait 3 seconds, and emerge with 30 years served. He repeated the thought in his head. 3 seconds, then I'm free. It sounded unbelievable, like a magic trick. Part of him was relieved, almost excited. He dreaded the idea of growing old in prison, yet the more he turned it over in his mind, the more hollow it felt. Perhaps it was the knowledge that he deserved to be behind bars for much longer than he'd end up serving. Or maybe it was the memory of what he'd done to land here in the first place. He stared at his hands. They were broad-fingered and calloused, covered in faint scratches and scars from years of odd jobs. Many times he had thought, these hands did it. These hands stopped a man from ever standing up again. He closed them into loose fists, recalling how quickly things had spiraled that night. He had been desperate. Bills were overdue, work was slow, and the man had come calling, grim satisfaction in his eyes. This wasn't the first time they had met. The man had visited before, issuing threats, demanding payment, laughing when he pleaded for more time. That final visit, though, had felt different. The man seemed bolder, less patient, or maybe he was more on edge, weighed down by sleepless nights and the shame of failing to find a solution. When he pictured it now, the scene came in sharp fragments. The man's sneer, the slight curl of a lip as he stepped closer, the reek of his cologne. Then came the shouts, each of them speaking over the other until words lost meaning. He remembered trying to back away, to claim he'd figure something out, if he could just have another week or two. The man didn't buy it. He squared up without a word, jaw locked, hands already moving. The shove came quick, no warning, just muscle and message. And then, instinct, a lunge, a desperate thrust of both hands, meant to push him back, to force space between them. The man stumbled into the corner of the table. He could still hear the dull thud, as if it echoed in his bones. The man's eyes went wide, then blank. The memory of blood and cheap aftershave hit him at once, sour and sharp. His stomach lurched. He swallowed, recalling every detail he'd given the police. He had confessed he didn't mean for it to happen. It wasn't that the man was a saint. He'd preyed on the vulnerable, extorted and threatened. But the prisoner still hated himself for taking a life, for using his own strength so rashly. No matter how he rationalized it, one fact remained. The man was dead. A clank at the door pulled him out of his thoughts. A warden he hadn't seen before, a middle-aged woman with an air of efficiency, stepped inside. She carried a handheld device, glancing at its screen before addressing him. "They need a last round of checks in the morning," she said, tapping the screen with a stylus. "Medical exam, psychological sign-off, standard procedure. Won't take long." He nodded. "Okay." She paused, shifting her weight as though there was more to say. "You do understand what's happening tomorrow, right?" "You mean the whole?" He managed a thin smile, unsure if it looked confident or merely resigned. "They said it'll be over in seconds." The warden nodded. Her tone was neutral, giving nothing away. "From out here, yes. From your perspective, well, that's the sentence, isn't it?" "Yeah." He looked at the bunk, noticing a faint scuff mark where the paint had chipped. "But it's still better than 30 years locked up." She studied him for a moment, then made a short note on her device. "Lights out soon. Try to rest." As the door hissed shut again, he exhaled slowly. Despite the emptiness of the room, he felt a weight pressing on his chest, the guilt that always surfaced when he thought of that night. A part of him believed he deserved decades of punishment, to serve the full measure of retribution. Perhaps in a way the whole offered that, albeit compressed into a pocket of time only he would truly experience. He stood up and paced the small cell, fingers raking through his cropped hair. Tomorrow he would enter that stark white cylinder. He imagined its smooth walls, bright lights, the cables feeding power into something he couldn't begin to understand. A dentist's office, maybe. That's what it reminded him of. The kind of place where pain came with purpose, where you left better than you arrived. His pulse fluttered. Another wave of conflicting emotions. Guilt for his crime, relief that he wouldn't physically rot in jail, fear of what might wait inside that sterile device. He wondered if he'd come out changed. Would he feel hollow, or perhaps more at peace? He had no idea. Sitting back on the bunk, he tried to map out a plan. He'd find a job, maybe in maintenance or fabrication. Keep his head down. Stay out of trouble. The moment that thought slid into his mind, a pang hit his chest, thinking of the man he'd killed. Did that man have children? A wife? He had never asked. He was too consumed by his own desperation to consider the other side of the story. All I can do is try to atone, he told himself. He didn't know if that was possible, but something in him clung to the idea. Maybe that was how he'd survive the long mental sentence, thinking of ways to do good once it was over. That's exactly what the whole was meant for. Forced reflection, the ultimate penance. He remained seated for a while, gazing at the door, half expecting someone else to enter with more forms to sign. But no one came. The overhead light hummed steadily. Time was a slow drip, counting down toward tomorrow. Eventually, he lay down on the bunk, staring at the featureless ceiling. The memory of the man's last breath haunted him. A flash of red on scuffed wood, a face gone slack. He told himself this was justice, an updated high-tech version, but justice nonetheless. He would pay in subjective years, and maybe that was enough. He told himself that as many times as he could, like a lullaby to keep his guilt in check. Bit by bit, weariness overcame him. As he drifted towards sleep, he pictured the white chamber again, bright and antiseptic. He realized with a dull sort of wonder that he felt no fear at all about stepping inside. Maybe that was the strangest part. He felt oddly calm. He shut his eyes. In the darkness, images flickered. The victim, the small apartment, the final angry blow. Then, in the same mental reel, the gentle gradient of Jaunt Solutions' logo, the promise of a few seconds in the real world and years in another. He wondered which memory would linger once he was free. Sleep took him, slow and uneasy. Outside, the corridor lights dimmed. In the hush of that solitary cell, the future pressed in on him. Brief in real time, but vast in his own. Tomorrow everything would change, even if no one else would be around to watch it happen. The device waited like a polished sentinel in the next room, humming in cold indifference. Grant Freeman arrived early. The doors were heavy, reinforced steel, original to the building despite their freshly mounted electronics. He passed the viewing window, polished now but still bearing faint scratches beneath its glossy surface, and entered the lab. New cables snaked neatly across old tiles, connecting rows of sleek monitors and diagnostic panels, all softly glowing in the dimness. Freeman understood most of the data scrolling across the screens, not perfectly, but enough to confirm everything was operational. Behind him, the chamber waited, clean and bright under new lights, quiet and ready. He dropped into a swivel chair and keyed in his credentials. A dozen windows populated the main screen, each detailing prior test runs. He'd been told to focus on routine checks, power usage, temperature fluctuations, standard efficiency reviews. Instead, He opened a folder labeled Subject Profiles, Phase 1, locked behind multiple passwords. It was no secret they had tested the whole on animals first. Freeman scrolled through lines of lab IDs, mice, rabbits, then primates. He examined the final outcome of each. Lower species often emerged with some disorientation, but recovered quickly. However, the closer the subjects got to higher cognitive function, apes, for instance, the notes became sparse. Freeman scrolled further, slowing as the logs grew shorter, clinical entries shrinking into terse, fragmented sentences. Near the end, details became thin. Subject numbers but no results. Timestamps but no observations. He paused, his cursor hovering over the word chimpanzee. The entry incomplete, ending mid-sentence. He clicked the embedded link. A red dialog box flashed once, blocking him instantly. Level 7 clearance required. He leaned back, staring at the screen's faint reflection. He glanced around as if expecting someone to catch him at it. The lab was silent, except for the steady hum of cooling fans, the faint beep of a system refreshing in the corner. It felt too still, the air unmoving and stale. He closed the window and opened another set of logs for older tests. That was where he found something else odd, buried in some neural response graphs. They looked normal at first. Noisy lines of electrical readings, activity spikes plotted against time. But as Freeman clicked through each subject in ascending order of complexity, he noticed a pattern. Lower-level animals had moderate surges, then tapered off, as if they'd eventually adapted to the compressed time frame. But in higher-level subjects, the spikes soared well beyond anything the system's guidelines predicted. One final log, the last available test subject, showed a reading so high it overshot the chart. The official note read, "Neural instability, data inconclusive." Freeman stared at the screen. If these logs were accurate, that last animal had experienced something more intense than the engineers expected. He couldn't help wondering, if a chimp's advanced cognition caused that kind of surge, what would happen to a human being? Outside the lab's locked door, footsteps approached and then receded. Freeman exhaled, realizing he'd been holding his breath. He navigated to the live feed for the system, Jaunt Solutions, Operational Diagnostics. The readouts for the upcoming test were stable: entropic field idle, quantum induction at baseline, temporal compression set to minimal. He drummed his fingers on the desk. The logs stuck in his mind. Could it be that the time ratio inside the hole wasn't as precise as they claimed? The thought unsettled him so thoroughly that he pulled out his phone to check the time. He had an hour before the morning briefing. Freeman resolved to speak with one of the senior engineers, someone who'd been with the project since its inception. Dr. Elena Varis occupied what had once been an administrative office, now crowded with diagnostic equipment and temporary desks. The window behind her was tinted dark, obscuring the bars outside but not completely hiding their shape. Freeman stepped into the cramped room, maneuvering between cables and monitors as he described what he'd seen. The strange patterns in the neural data, abrupt cut-offs in the logs, the final readings spiking far beyond normal limits. Varis listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable. When Freeman finished, she leaned back slightly, finally meeting his eyes. "The logs are incomplete for a reason," Dr. Varis said. "A reason that's above your clearance level." "I'm aware," he said, voice low. "But the readings show a significantly elevated neural response. It's outside the usual range." She tilted her head, as if choosing her words carefully. "We have experts evaluating every data point, far more qualified than you or me. The system is running as intended." He didn't back down. But if the neural spikes indicate that the subject's consciousness is active past the set ratio, you're not in a position to interpret that, she said, closing the conversation with a brisk finality. We have years of theoretical modeling behind this. You're a technician here, Freeman. It's not your test. His lips tightened. He wasn't trying to undermine them. He just wanted to make sure no one got hurt. I just think we should perhaps hold off until... Her eyes flickered with impatience. The board expect this to go live across multiple facilities soon. We're not halting anything. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to make a call. She stood, indicating the door. Freeman gathered his courage. They're about to put a human in there today. Don't you think we owe it to him to be absolutely sure? Dr. Varys let out a measured breath. That's not your decision or mine. The pilot has been approved at the highest levels. Don't overstep. The sting of dismissal hung in the air. With no other option, Freeman left. He wandered the corridors for a few minutes, mind churning. Perhaps it was just an anomaly. Maybe the advanced test data was corrupted or mislabeled. He tried telling himself that, but it didn't quell the tight feeling in his chest. Eventually, he returned to the lab, passing the observation window. On the other side, the device stood in its staging area, the tall cylinder anchored by its thick cables, overhead lights reflecting off its pristine surface. Engineers in red coveralls, similar to Freeman's but with higher rank patches, were busy calibrating the entropic field for a dry run. He paused by the window, resting his hand against the cool glass. Inside the chamber, the device gave off a low, resonant hum. A test sequence began, a short spool up to check the power flow. The lights flickered, and for a moment, the corridor felt unnaturally still. He heard the rising pitch of the induction coils, the barely audible thrumming that signaled quantum bridging. Freeman's pulse quickened, imagining what it might be like for a person locked inside that hum. He pressed his palm harder against the glass, torn between the sense of duty that said follow orders and the moral alarm that screamed, speak up. The hum dropped off. A red indicator light on the device flicked to amber and then back to green. Dry run complete. From Freeman's vantage, it all looked so controlled, so simple. No one else seemed worried. He lingered a moment longer, brow tight with worry, feeling the chill of the glass beneath his hand. In a few hours, they'd guide that prisoner in, seal the door, and press the button. Freeman pictured the prisoner's face, calm, almost naive. The logs he'd seen replayed in his mind, spike after spike of neural activity. He stepped away from the window, exhaling unsteadily. Whether it was the dryness of the air or a pang of conscience, he suddenly felt a lump in his throat. Somewhere in the distance, a warning chime sounded, likely an automated system check. Freeman turned and walked toward the control station, the corridor's overhead lights glaring. Each step echoed louder than it should, as if the building itself magnified his anxiety. He tried once more to imagine that everything was fine, that he was just misreading the data. But the cold feeling didn't leave him. He slid through the lab doors and, with a final glance at the readouts on his console, prepared for the day's demonstration. The device would soon be active for a live subject. Only seconds would pass on the outside. Inside, it would be a different story. Grant Freeman returned to the corridor outside the chamber. A lone warden sat nearby, not looking up as Freeman passed. The lights were dim, low-glare LEDs casting sharp lines across the floor. The prisoner was visible through a narrow slot of reinforced glass, sitting still, eyes forward. As Freeman entered the antechamber, he saw the prisoner's hair had been trimmed neatly. He looked younger this way, almost boyish. A warden removed a set of light cuffs, and the prisoner rubbed his wrists gingerly. "There he is," the prisoner said, his voice more cheerful than Freeman expected. "Morning, Mr. Freeman." Freeman mustered a faint nod in response. "Good morning." "They're letting me out, right?" The prisoner attempted a small laugh, though it sounded forced. Freeman's mouth felt dry. He glanced at the engineers bustling in the adjacent control area. He wasn't sure how to answer without sowing doubt. "Yes," he said quietly, "from our perspective." A senior officer in a crisp uniform approached, tapping at a handheld device. "We're cleared for the final stage," she told Freeman. Then to the prisoner, in a kinder tone, "You'll be processed into the main chamber. No trouble, all right?" The prisoner nodded, that hint of a smile returning. "No trouble. I'm ready." They set off down a sterile corridor lined with bright overhead strips. The walls were white, the floor a pale composite that reflected their footsteps. The corridor led to a set of heavy doors, hastily emblazoned with jaunt solutions. Freeman swiped his ID, and the doors slid open with a mechanical hiss, revealing the wide staging bay. The whole sat at the room's center, practical, white-walled, brightly lit like medical equipment, awaiting its first patient. Staff worked quietly at terminals, running final calibrations. Freeman noticed the prisoner squinting slightly at the glare. "Still looks like a storage tank," he said. "You'd never guess what it's for if no one told you." One of the red coverall engineers overheard. "It's simpler than it looks, trust me," she said with a tight-lipped smile. "You'll be in and out before you know it." Freeman felt a queasy churn in his gut. Before we know it. He recalled the grim data he'd uncovered, the incomplete logs. They paused at a small console near the device's entrance hatch, where another technician tapped a series of commands. The prisoner was handed a short set of instructions. Stand upright, keep his arms at his sides, relax. He looked at the paper, then at Freeman, uncertain. "Am I supposed to do anything else?" he asked. Freeman shook his head. "No," he said softly. "Just follow their lead." A senior supervisor materialized, an older man with steely hair and a practiced smile. He clapped Freeman on the shoulder. "Thanks for everything," he murmured. "We'll take it from here." Freeman wanted to protest, to point out that the prisoner hadn't truly grasped the subjective duration. But the supervisor's hand was firm, a clear sign not to speak. The hatch stood open. The prisoner was guided toward it between two wardens, hands at his sides, face blank. No one spoke. The only sound was the echo of boots on tile. The prisoner stepped forward, heart fluttering as he peered inside. If the outside chamber was bright, the interior was blinding. White walls, white floor, white ceiling. He hesitated on the threshold, hearing only the hum of machinery hidden behind panels. Then he swallowed hard and stepped in. The hatch sealed behind him with a hiss that made his ears pop. He glanced back. The door was already gone, the wall blank and featureless. His breath hitched. The air was cool, almost odorless. "They said it's just seconds. I'll be out soon." For a heartbeat, the chamber was utterly still. The glow from the curved walls intensified, so bright he had to squint. Then the machine came online. A deep, resonant hum built from somewhere beneath the floor. Slow at first, then rising until it felt like a static charge dancing over his skin. He tried to swallow the knot in his throat, but his muscles refused. It was as if the air itself thickened, pressing against his joints. For an instant, he told himself to step backward, to knock on the hatch, anything. But he couldn't make his foot budge an inch. His arms stayed rigid at his sides, fingers curled awkwardly. A wave of cold realization spread through him. He strained, willing his leg to move, willing a single muscle to obey. Nothing happened. Heart hammering, or so he imagined, he told himself to breathe. No inhale came, no exhale. The hum grew louder, pulsing through his skull. It was like falling into slow motion, yet he remained upright, locked in place. The glow enveloping him lost all semblance of a wall or a floor, blending into a seamless white that stretched in every direction. He couldn't even blink. His eyes stayed fixed, taking in the brilliance but giving him no focus, no corner to anchor his vision. Seconds ago, he'd been sure he could manage a single step. Now his entire body might as well have been encased in steel. Just a few seconds, he thought, panic buzzing behind the words. I'll be out any moment. But time offered no confirmation. Each instant felt endless, and he had no way to mark its passage, no heartbeat throb, no breath cycle. A raw, hollow terror spiked as he realized he couldn't even gasp or scream. His mouth stayed locked, jaw clenched in a rictus of stunned silence. The hum peaked, then leveled off, becoming a steady drone that rattled around his trapped consciousness. He tried to close his eyes, desperate to shut out the glare, but his lids remained fixed. He had only his thoughts, swirling in frantic circles, banging against the cage of his own mind. I'm still alive, I'm still here. Yet he felt no sign of life except awareness, spinning through a bright void that refused to offer comfort or change. The whiteness pressed in from all sides, every bit of it identical, making it impossible to gauge distance or shape. If there was a ceiling, it dissolved into the light. If there was a floor, it gave no sense of surface under his feet. A stab of panic told him to count, 1, 2, 3, but he lost track instantly, each number blurred into a single, paralyzing now. I just need to breathe. Please let me breathe. His lungs remained still, no air passing in or out. The chamber had reduced him to a mind floating in a blank eternity. For a horrifying moment, he wondered if he was already dead, if this was some final, punishing limbo. But no, he was aware, and that awareness kept screaming at him to do something. It'll end soon, he lied to himself. It has to. Yet he couldn't shake the dread that maybe it would never end, that the few seconds everyone promised were ballooning into an immeasurable horror beyond any sense of mercy or release. In his silent, motionless prison, he tried to recall the aftershave smell of the man he'd killed, the face of the warden who'd uncuffed him, anything to ground him in memory. Even that began to slip, reality growing distant, overshadowed by the featureless glow and the relentless hum. The very act of remembering felt like grasping at shadows, and soon his mind latched onto the simplest mantra it had left. I can't move. I can't breathe. I can't move. And so he stood there, a statue in a field of infinite white, senses robbed of all reference except the dull roar in his mind. Seconds, minutes, hours. In the silence, time unraveled. Document reference: JS-ACR/INT, clearance level 7, restricted distribution. The Accelerated Custodial Resolution, ACR program, colloquially referred to as the Whole, was officially discontinued by Jaunt Solutions following a series of adverse events and mounting evidence of significant neural damage among test subjects. Despite initial successes with lower cognitive organisms, human trials demonstrated erratic and extreme variations in subjective timescale, resulting in severe psychological trauma. 1. Delayed recognition of time discrepancy. The earliest indicators of altered neural processing speeds were documented in incomplete primate logs. This data was neither thoroughly investigated nor disclosed to clinical oversight committees. Unexpected increases in cortical firing under quantum induction drastically accelerated the subject's perception. Subsequent testing on human volunteers revealed accelerated neural processing at levels far beyond the intended 1-to-1 ratio. Internal estimates suggest a minimum factor of 1 to 100 for most subjects, with higher estimates reaching a factor of 1 to 1,000. In no case did any test subject retain coherent verbal function upon release, rendering precise measurements impossible. 2. Neural degradation and program termination. All human participants displayed acute catatonia or irreversible cognitive failure. Post-exit examinations identified extensive degradation in higher brain regions, correlated with sustained synaptic hyperactivity. Review boards concluded that the project's original promise of humane, instantaneous sentencing had been compromised by the unforeseen intensity of temporal compression. Consequently, Jaunt Solutions opted to halt further ACR deployments. 3. Ethical and financial considerations. An internal ethics panel found no evidence of formal misconduct within the research protocol, citing the emergent nature of quantum induction technology and incomplete theoretical models. However, the public relations risk was deemed unacceptable, given multiple fatalities or catatonic outcomes. Despite pushback from certain board members who argued for continued development, corporate legal counsel advised immediate discontinuation. 4th, potential for repurposed use. Although official closure was announced, concerns persist regarding undisclosed applications. Reports from field operatives indicate that modified ACR units may have been transferred to undisclosed locations under government or paramilitary contracts. No concrete records verify these claims. Nonetheless, several whistleblowers suggest that the whole is still used in covert operations, particularly for high-level interrogation or psychological warfare. 5. Conclusion and future implications. While the ACR program is formally suspended, the technology itself remains viable for advanced cognitive manipulation, albeit with uncharted risks. Documents recovered post-termination refer to the platform as irreplaceable for secure confinement and intense interrogation procedures. In light of these findings, Jaunt Solutions acknowledges the severe psychological toll, but concedes that the whole's core mechanism is too valuable to abandon outright. End of memorandum. This document is provided for internal review only. Dissemination beyond authorized personnel is prohibited.